Hi, I'm Odalyn. My own sister, now a flight attendant, grabbed me by the hair and dragged me out of first class, in front of everyone. She hissed, "This seat isn't for failures." But what no one knew was that in 7 minutes I'd become her boss. They saw humiliation. They didn't see the years she erased me, my job, my voice, even my mother's will. So before I disappeared quietly again, I chose to let the world watch her fall first. Before we dive in, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and have you ever been pushed aside by someone who was supposed to protect you? The Houston air was heavy with summer heat as I stepped out of the Uber and adjusted the strap of my carry-on. Bush Intercontinental looked just as I remembered, but today felt different. It wasn't the flight. I'd flown enough. It was something else. A quiet tremble under my skin, like walking into a room where I once felt small, but choosing to walk tall anyway. I wasn't here for vacation, wasn't here with anyone. This trip was mine, a business class ticket I'd bought myself, with my own money on my own time. Not since Mama died 4 years ago had I flown anything but coach, and even that had been rare. Every time I almost did something for myself, someone else needed more. But not today. I paused near the entrance and slipped my hand into my side pocket, touching the silk handkerchief folded neatly within. The initials CH stitched in gold thread still looked untouched by time. Mama's. I didn't need luck. I just needed her near. The TSA line was blessedly short. I moved quickly, quietly, head high. My shoes clicked soft but sure against the linoleum floor. At gate C32, the sign above read, "Boarding now, Group 1. That was me. A flight attendant in a crisp blue uniform glanced up, scanned my boarding pass, and smiled politely. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Cruz." Ms. Cruz. Funny how that still sounded foreign, even now. As I stepped into the jet bridge, the chill of the plane's AC brushed against my skin. First class was to the left. I took a breath. Not out of pride, but the way someone breathes before stepping into a memory they haven't touched in years. I found seat 2A, window, clean, neat. I eased into it, tucked my bag under the seat in front, and sat with my knees folded tight. The leather felt unfamiliar, not just physically but emotionally, like something reserved for people who didn't flinch at a $900 ticket. I heard footsteps behind me, then a voice. "Excuse me, miss?" My stomach clenched before I turned. Celine, my sister. Same sharp cheekbones, same clipped tone. But everything else had changed. The uniform, the polished hair, the hard eyes. She didn't flinch when our eyes met. In fact, she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her pupils. She looked at my seat. "Let me see your boarding pass." I blinked. "Why?" "Protocol," she said smoothly, like she'd practiced that answer. Sometimes people get confused. I reached into my purse and handed her the pass. She stared at it for a moment too long. "This is for first-class passengers only," she said louder than necessary. Eyes turned, necks craned. "I know," I replied, keeping my voice even. "That's where I'm sitting." She nodded once, then tilted her head. "Step aside. I need to verify something." Something in me crumbled right then. Not because I didn't belong, but because I knew she'd already decided I didn't. The way she said, "step aside," sounded more like, "step down." I stood. The plane felt smaller than it had moments ago. She leaned in, and before I could process it, her hand clamped onto my wrist. Hard. "Let go," I said quietly. She didn't. Instead, she yanked. Hard enough that I lost balance. My knees knocked the seat back as I stumbled forward. Then, with a vicious tug at my hair, she hissed, loud and clear, for everyone to hear, "This seat isn't for failures. Get back where you belong." My mouth opened, but no words came. Gasps echoed from somewhere behind. A man in a tie leaned into the aisle, shocked. A woman clutched her pearls, literally, and yet, no one moved. No one helped. Celine straightened her blazer, adjusted her badge, and motioned toward the back. Some other attendant looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. I walked, not because I agreed, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew that sometimes the best weapon is timing. I kept my eyes forward as she shoved me into 43B, the seat near the restrooms, the place they put people when they want to remind them they're no one. I sat. The silence in my head was deafening. Years of family dinners where I was asked to pour the drinks but never toasted. Years of, your sister's doing so well while I worked 3 jobs. Years of being the youngest, the quiet one, the helper, never the hero. My scalp stung, my chest tightened. I blinked once, twice, and then I remembered the last time she looked at me like that. Mama's funeral. And Selene had stood in black heels, delivering a speech like she was the widow, not the daughter. When I'd stepped forward to say something, anything, she'd blocked the mic with her hand and whispered, "You're not family anymore." Back then, I'd let her take the spotlight. Not today. I reached into my purse with steady fingers, found my phone, and typed a message I never thought I'd send. Code red. She's on duty. I need the trigger pulled in 7. Sent. The plane was still boarding. She had no idea. I leaned back into the stained headrest and closed my eyes. My breath trembled, but not from weakness. Not today, I whispered. I may have sat in seat 43B now, but in 7 minutes, the sky would belong to me. The seat beneath me didn't feel any softer, but I'd stopped noticing the sting in my scalp. The moment I sent that message, something inside me settled. Not calmly, no, not that, but with purpose, like a match waiting to meet the wick. I kept my eyes forward, lips neutral. Nothing about me suggested anything more than a tired woman stuck in the back of the plane. I even let the plastic water cup tremble just slightly in my hand. Let anyone looking think it was nerves. Then the PA crackled. Would Flight Attendant Selene Winslow please disembark and report to the gate manager immediately? It was calm, professional, and carried the kind of edge that told you this wasn't a casual call. I didn't move, but around me heads turned. Someone a few rows ahead muttered, "Wasn't she just up front yelling?" Another voice, a woman, added under her breath, "That was the one who dragged her sister, right?" Selene froze mid-stride, tray of drinks still in hand. She blinked, just once, and smiled too fast. "We're experiencing a small boarding delay," she said, voice thinner than usual. Nothing serious. But there was a tightness in her tone she couldn't hide. The lead flight attendant emerged from the galley, stepping slightly closer to her. No words exchanged, but I saw the unspoken. "You're not getting out of this." Selene hesitated. Her eyes searched the cabin like she was hoping someone might object, might ask why. No one did. The drinks were quietly handed off. She set her jaw, adjusted her belt, and walked back toward the front. Before stepping out, she turned, only for a moment, and our eyes met. I didn't blink. I didn't smirk. I sipped my water. The cabin door hissed open, and then she was gone. A beat passed, then whispers bloomed like weeds. That was wild. "Think she's in trouble?" "She dragged that poor woman like she was luggage." I didn't respond. I let the buzz grow on its own. Instead, I reached for the tray table, lowered it with slow hands. The dull metal edge caught my reflection, tired eyes, unflinching. Then, lower down, the hint of gold embroidery on silk. CH Mama. I hadn't cried at her funeral, not because I didn't feel anything, but because by the time I arrived, they'd already buried her without me. 4 years ago. The day had been hot, dry, the kind of day you sweat through your shoes. The church smelled like carnations and dust. I'd been delayed at the hospital with a patient I couldn't leave alone. No one waited for me. When I stepped inside, the service was already halfway through. Selene stood at the pulpit, voice crisp, face composed, speaking as if she were the only child Mama ever had. She didn't say my name once, not even a glance in my direction. When it ended, I stepped forward to share a few words, to say something, anything, about Mama's laugh, her peach cobbler, the way she always tied her scarves on Sundays. Selene blocked the mic with her hand. Her whisper burned hotter than any slap. "You barely showed up for Mom," she hissed. "She was ashamed of you. Sit down." And the worst part? The way people nodded. The way no one said a word. That day, I walked out of the church before the final hymn ended. No one followed me. I never wore black again. Now, 4 years later, I sat in a seat that reeked faintly of disinfectant and bad decisions, my palm damp around the one thing I'd carried from that day, the handkerchief Mama had kept in her pocket through every chemo appointment, the weight of silence pressed into my ribs. But this time, I wasn't the one disappearing. This time, someone else was getting walked out. I straightened. Across the aisle, a man in a slate suit passed by with quiet steps. He didn't glance at me, but as he reached row 44, he paused, adjusted his glasses, shifted slightly so his profile tilted just enough toward me. I spoke so softly I barely heard it myself. "Is it done?" His reply was equally subdued. "Almost. Stay buckled." He kept walking. A normal businessman to anyone else. But I knew him. Marcus, legal counsel for the Airline's board. I'd met him last month at a conference in Austin, 2 days after submitting my acquisition proposal. I hadn't needed vengeance. I'd needed leverage. Celine thought she'd buried me the day Mama was lowered into the ground, but dirt can feed roots, and roots can crack concrete. I leaned back in seat 43B, heart finally settling into a rhythm I recognized. Not fear, not shame. Readiness. They called her to the gate, but soon, the entire gate would belong to me. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The calm that settled into me wasn't the kind that comes from winning, not yet, but the kind that comes from knowing the storm has already passed overhead and now it's just a matter of picking up what's mine. The envelope in my purse felt heavier than it should have. I hadn't opened it yet. There was no need. I already knew what it said. But just knowing it was there, signed, sealed, real, gave me something to anchor myself to as I sat back in this economy seat still warm with humiliation. I rested my fingers on the folded tray and let my mind drift back. Further than 4 years ago, back before Mama's funeral, before the silence between Celine and me turned from cold to violent. 6 years back. I was in the middle of interviewing for a creative director position with Altitude, a boutique travel brand. A dream role, marketing luxury escapes, telling stories through images and emotion. They were impressed by my first-round proposal, and the final interview was informal, brunch with the executive team, just to feel the vibe. I remember the morning clearly. My portfolio was printed, notes ready, blazer pressed. I was in our apartment's kitchen pouring coffee into my thermos when Celine breezed in like she still owned the place. "You're overdressed," she said casually, glancing at my heels. I ignored her. She knew how much that job meant to me. I didn't expect her to be supportive, but I never thought she'd go further than the usual eye rolls, until her elbow accidentally knocked over her mug. Coffee splashed across my papers, soaking right through my pitch layouts. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she'd said, hands on her cheeks, doing that fake gasp she'd mastered in high school. I had 20 minutes until the meeting. I tried salvaging what I could, grabbed what pages hadn't warped and dashed out, praying my confidence would cover the chaos. It didn't. They were polite, sure, but distracted. Someone even whispered something about lack of preparation. I felt my chance slipping through my fingers like warm sand. I smiled through it, said thank you, walked out of that brunch feeling like I was made of smoke. 2 weeks later, I accidentally saw the forwarded email. It had come through my spam folder, a CC thread from an old joint Gmail account we used to share for bills. Celine had responded to the HR coordinator, using my name. "Thank you for the opportunity," she wrote. "I've decided to pursue a different path. Wishing the best to Altitude." I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I sat in my tiny kitchen, staring at those words, feeling like someone had vacuumed the air right out of my lungs. Then I saw the last email in the thread. "We're thrilled to welcome Nadia Halston per Celine's recommendation." I didn't apply for anything again after that. It wasn't that I thought I didn't deserve opportunities, I just Stopped believing anyone would let me keep them. That job was the last thing I ever dared to want. Back in the present, the hum of the plane around me was steady. A man shuffled into the row behind me. Another child cried somewhere up front. I sat still. That was the moment I stopped applying for anything, I whispered in my head. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I let her convince me the world didn't want me to try. But the thing about silence, it makes you resourceful. I glanced toward my purse. 5 months ago, I met a man named Darren Choi. He wasn't a flashy Wall Street type, no Rolex, no slick hair. He spoke slowly, clearly, like someone who read contracts for fun. He told me about a restructuring opportunity. An airline was hemorrhaging money, bleeding at the top, but with the right capital, it could be flipped into something formidable. Don't invest if you're looking for applause, he said. The board's still old school. They like their winners loud and male. I smiled then, just faintly. I don't want credit, I replied. I want control, quiet control. We set up a business under my mother's maiden name, Calderon Hughes Strategies. Sounded respectable enough, invisible enough. $6.2 million. Everything I'd saved, everything I'd flipped through real estate and frugal living and nights where I ate canned soup just to avoid dipping into principal. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was afraid, but because the victory I wanted wasn't the kind people could clap for. It was the kind you felt deep in your bones, the kind that stitched something back together where trust used to be. I could still hear Mama's voice sometimes, not in a ghostly way, more like an old voicemail that never really deleted. Let them have the spotlight, she used to say, brushing Celine's curls when we were little. You protect the roots. I didn't know what she meant back then. I do now. This wasn't about Celine anymore. Not really. It was about the little girl who stopped raising her hand in class after Celine mocked her handwriting, the woman who turned down speaking opportunities because it's not my place, the job I lost, the funeral I was erased from, the plane seat I was dragged out of. It was all the same story. Until now. A rustle interrupted my thoughts. The man in the gray suit from earlier returned, leaned ever so slightly toward me, and passed me a slim envelope under the guise of adjusting his briefcase. 3 days, he murmured. Then he walked on. I opened the envelope once he disappeared. Inside, the final confirmation. My voting rights would go public at the board meeting. 3 days from now, I'd no longer be a shadow. I'd be the hand pulling the strings, unless something pushed the timeline forward. And knowing Celine, she'd never let a day pass without trying to remind me of who she thought I was. I didn't need her to behave. I needed one more humiliation. And Celine was always good at those. A low ding echoed through the cabin as Celine reappeared at the front of the plane, stepping back in with a controlled sort of energy, the kind that wasn't calm, just calculated. Her jaw was tight, her smile strained, and I knew that look. She was about to put on a show. Her eyes scanned the rows like she was taking inventory of livestock, not passengers. I could tell she was looking for me, though she already knew exactly where I was. Row 43, Seat B, right next to the restroom, a place they usually reserve for toddlers and the kind of travelers who complain before the wheels leave the ground. She adjusted her scarf with a deliberate tug and made her way down the aisle. As she neared the back, she stopped short and turned to a silver-haired man in a navy blazer. "Apologies for the earlier delay, sir," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. There was a bit of confusion. That woman back there, she jutted her thumb in my direction without even turning, thought she was entitled to first class. Must be exhausting, keeping up appearances when you've been a charity case since day one. The air inside the cabin dropped. I could feel the chill settle, like someone had opened a window in mid-air. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. A child a few rows up asked his mom, "Why is she yelling?" I didn't flinch. Celine turned fully toward me now, theatrics in full bloom. "Next time, maybe try coach from the start," she added with a smirk. "It suits people who don't earn their way." There it was, the blow she thought would shatter me. I reached for my water bottle with steady fingers, lifted it, and took a sip without breaking eye contact. Not one word, not a flinch. Just stillness. Her nostrils flared, a tiny tell I knew too well. She hated silence more than anything, especially mine. Someone up front, seat 21C maybe, raised their phone. I could see the lens catching everything, but Celine's voice snapped back like a whip. "Put that down," she barked. "Security has already been alerted." The hand lowered. The air crackled with discomfort, but my phone had already been rolling. From the moment she stepped back onto the plane, I'd pressed record, low angle, silent mode, tucked beside me on the seat like a second pulse. I didn't need security. I needed proof. And Celine had just handed it to me with her perfectly manicured fingers. I whispered to myself, "You just handed me the last piece I needed." The words barely reached my lips, just enough to hear them vibrate in my chest. The ache wasn't in my stomach or my heart anymore. It had settled into something else. Resolve. That's when I saw her. Harper. The younger flight attendant with soft brown curls and eyes that darted but didn't miss. She walked past my row slowly, then paused, folding a beverage napkin with practiced grace and slipping it onto my tray table as if delivering peanuts. When she walked away, I opened the napkin. Inside, in neat blue ink, "You're not crazy. I've seen how she treats you. If you need a witness, I'm here." My throat tightened. It wasn't the insult that cracked me. It was that note. It was being seen. Really seen. For a moment, I felt the kind of vulnerability you don't recover from by fighting back. You heal through recognition, through someone whispering, "Me too," when no one else will even look you in the eye. The plane landed 2 hours later. No more outbursts. Celine stayed quiet, perhaps realizing she'd pushed too far. Or maybe she thought she'd finally broken whatever was left of me. She hadn't. That night, back in the small Airbnb I'd rented just outside Houston, I sat at the table with my laptop open. The wood grain felt warm under my palm, grounding. I forwarded the video file straight to my attorney. Then I double-checked Texas civil law, public defamation, especially by a uniformed employee in a commercial setting. It wasn't just grounds for a lawsuit. It was a PR nightmare for a company in the middle of restructuring. I added Harper's napkin, scanned and saved as a PDF. Then I opened a folder titled Transfer Execution, Accelerate Ownership. My mouse hovered over the final toggle. With one click, the internal transfer was complete. The vote control? Mine. Early. Effective immediately. I stared at the confirmation screen. A quiet satisfaction bloomed low in my belly. Not joy, not revenge, authority. But I didn't blast it out. Didn't call the press, didn't tweet. I waited, because timing is what makes a storm hit where it hurts. And I wanted the weather report to come from her. I shut the laptop and reached into my wallet. From behind my ID, I slid out a small silver key. My grandmother's. She'd kept it on a string around her neck for decades. Said it didn't open anything anymore, but she carried it because it reminded me of who I was when I wasn't sure. The initials were etched into the handle, LHC Lucia Haynes Calderon. She used to tell me, "Dignity doesn't need to shout." And tonight, I believed her. I could have exposed Celine on the tarmac. I could have screamed like she did, posted everything, burned it all down. But that wasn't me. I wasn't trying to win the audience. I was trying to reclaim the stage. Celine thought she'd dragged me out of first class, but I was already holding the keys to the cockpit. The house was quiet that morning, just the slow hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the wood floor beneath my bare feet. I sat at the small kitchen table, the same spot where I'd eaten toast and scrambled eggs the day before, thinking things had finally turned a corner. Then came the ping. I tapped my phone screen. Breaking, airline benefactor facing bankruptcy, family insider speaks out on mental health history, instability. My thumb hovered over the headline, unwilling to believe what I was reading. But I opened it anyway. And there it was. My name. My story. Twisted and sold to the world like tabloid trash. The article didn't just speculate. It detailed how I'd been hospitalized after giving birth, how I'd battled postpartum depression, how I'd stepped back from work for emotional reasons. All true, but cruel in the way it was framed. Weaponized truth, the kind that strips context and dignity. And then the worst part, a quote from an anonymous source close to the family, suggesting I'd been handed my stake in the airline out of pity because I couldn't keep a job or hold it together long enough to deserve one. I didn't need to guess who leaked it. Celine. I stood up too fast. The chair scraped against the tile with a sharp screech. My breath came short. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring out the window at nothing, the trees blurring under a sudden sting of tears. My chest tightened. Maybe she's right. The thought came uninvited. Maybe I was never cut out for this. Maybe I was the family burden, the one they whispered about after holidays, the one they only remembered when they needed something covered, fixed, paid off quietly. I walked slowly down the hall to the mirror in the entryway. My reflection stared back, older than I remembered. Tired. My hand reached up and traced the faint lines at my eyes, the ones that deepened each time I tried to smile through something. Maybe I was never meant to lead, I whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke. I walked back to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and began drafting an email to the board. Subject: Postponement of control vote. Dear members, in light of recent media attention and personal matters now in the public eye, I believe it is best to pause the control transition until further notice. I appreciate your understanding. My finger hovered over the send button. Then, a knock. It startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I padded to the door and opened it to find a uniformed courier, envelope in hand. Delivery for Odalyn Winslow. I signed without speaking, closed the door, and stood staring at the envelope. My name was printed neatly, and in the corner, the return address of a law office I hadn't thought about in years. Inside, a letter, sealed, dated 6 months before Mom died. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded it. My Odalyn, if you're reading this, it means you're finally stepping into something bigger than they ever allowed you to believe you could. I always knew you would. This airline, it's yours. Celine always wanted the spotlight, but you built things. You fixed what we ignored, quietly, steadily. The world needs more of that. Don't let them silence you. Love, Mom. I sat down and cried. Not because of the words, but because I almost gave it all back. I almost believed Celine again. When the tears dried, I noticed something else in the envelope. A photograph. One I hadn't seen in years. It was our family, taken at a lake house one summer, Mom in the center, Celine on her right, me on her left. Only, I wasn't in it. I frowned, then looked again. Another version of the photo was tucked behind it. This time, I was there. Both of us, arms around Mom. The cropped version had made the rounds in an old feature about the Winslow sisters. I remembered seeing it in a magazine once, wondering why I wasn't in the picture. Celine had cut me out, literally. The camera didn't lie, but she made sure the world never saw the truth. I looked down at the email draft still open on my laptop. I hit delete, then opened a secure channel on Slack. Prep formal control agenda, move date to tomorrow. Enter. Done. The control transfer would go through, early, quietly, legally. And she wouldn't even know what was coming until the headline hit the inbox. I sat back, breathing deeply. The light outside was shifting. Late afternoon now, golden, warm. A soft reminder that time kept moving, no matter how long you stayed stuck in someone else's shadow. My phone buzzed again. A text. Harper. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I'm with you. 5 short words. And yet they steadied me more than anything else all day. I sat there for a while, hand still resting on the screen, the words echoing like a second heartbeat. She saw me, really saw me, and for the first time in days, I exhaled. Celine tried to erase me from history. Now I'd make her face the truth, publicly. The glass doors whispered shut behind me. My heels echoed softly against the marble floor as I stepped into the shareholder conference center, a sleek modern space made of steel and polished silence, the kind of place that didn't forgive mistakes or emotion. I walked past a row of minimalist chairs, black leather and chrome, and made my way to the head of the long conference table. My folder was already waiting, aligned perfectly. My hands were steady. The seat beside mine, reserved for Celine, was still empty. I didn't need to check the time. She was late on purpose. When the doors opened 10 minutes later, she entered like a runway model. Shoulders back, chin lifted, a little too much swing in her hips. She peeled off her airline-issued blazer like it was some kind of performance art, tossed it onto the chair and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look who's playing CEO today." A few quiet chuckles floated through the room. I didn't flinch, just tapped my binder twice. Her eyes narrowed. No one noticed as I reached under the table and slid a small USB stick into the port beneath the monitor screen. I didn't look up as the interface loaded. The files were already in order, silent, efficient, invisible. Celine slid into her seat with a smirk, propped an elbow on the table, and began speaking before the meeting even officially started. "As the face of this airline," she said, making sure to glance dramatically toward the handful of investors, "I think it's time we bring some structure back. Lately, there's been confusion about who's running what." She looked at me like she was addressing a toddler who'd wandered into the wrong room. That was her mistake. I pressed the remote. The screen behind her blinked once, then filled with a clean title slide. 3 years of growth, operations, infrastructure, capital contributions. A quiet murmur stirred across the room. I clicked again. Slide after slide. Growth charts, budget approvals, rerouted efficiency metrics, new gate contracts signed under a holding company bearing my mother's maiden name, flashed across the screen. Every item, my work, my funding, my blueprint. Celine froze. One of the board members adjusted his glasses and leaned in. "Wait, these infrastructure revisions, this was you?" I answered evenly. "It always was." Celine laughed. A dry, nervous bark. "You mean to tell me, while I was on international layovers and media campaigns, you were making executive decisions? Based on what? Emotion?" I turned, full body now, to face her. "No," I said, "based on control, the kind that doesn't need applause." Another slide loaded behind me, this time a scanned copy of a regulatory filing stamped and dated, intent to acquire operational authority, filed 48 hours ago. "Effective tomorrow," I continued, "I will assume full control of operations. Today's meeting is not a vote, it's a courtesy." The room fell into silence so complete I could hear Celine's bracelet clink against the table. She stood up too fast, pushing her chair back. "You wouldn't dare." I rose slowly, folding my hands on the folder in front of me. "It's already done." Just then, the back door opened, and Harper stepped in, still in her flight uniform, but without the usual restraint in her eyes. She nodded once, quietly. Celine followed the motion, her mouth slightly open. 2 hours from now," I said. "Your contract will be reviewed under a different authority. You may want to clear your schedule." I didn't wait for her reply. I sat back down. Celine stormed out of the room. Her heels clicked furiously against the tile. The air in the boardroom held. From the window, I watched her emerge onto the plaza outside, cameras already waiting, phones already raised. Someone whispered beside me, "Wasn't that the sister who got dragged off the plane?" I didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't speak. The conference room was still, humming with breath held back, and I just sat there. You don't always need a microphone, just the receipts. The boardroom emptied slowly, like air leaking from a pressurized cabin. I didn't move. I watched them file out, some heads down, some glancing back, most pretending to be unfazed by what they'd just witnessed. Celine had fled minutes earlier, lips pressed tight, camera flashes catching the sweat at her temples. She hadn't looked back once. Harper lingered by the doorway. She didn't say anything, just gave a subtle nod, like a pilot signaling turbulence was over. I returned it with the smallest lift of my chin, then gathered my documents, slid the USB from the port, and left through the side corridor. The next morning, I opened my eyes to the unmistakable buzz of a phone vibrating nonstop. 16 messages, then 32, then more. I reached for it, already suspecting something, and there it was. My face, mid-step on the courthouse steps, plastered across the homepage of a gossip site. The headline shouted in all caps, "Takeover or theft? Mystery sister accused of embezzling millions from Airline slush fund." Below it, a blurry image of me holding a coffee cup, cropped to look sinister, next to a quote from an anonymous family source, suggesting I'd been emotionally unstable for years. There was a link to a morning show clip. I hesitated, then tapped play. Celine sat on the news couch, makeup flawless, hands folded daintily in her lap. She blinked too often. I didn't want to come on air," she said, voice breaking in all the practiced places. "But when family turns on family, when they hide things, take things, it's not about business anymore. It's about protecting legacy." The anchor leaned in. "Are you saying your sister manipulated her way into the company?" Celine sniffled. "All I'm saying is, you don't always know what someone's capable of, especially when they've been fragile in the past." She reached for a tissue. The camera cut to her eyes, glossed with fake concern. I turned off the screen, not because I was furious, but because I wasn't. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't rattled. I was clear, crystal clear. I pulled up an old image file, the security footage from that day at the airport gate. My fingers hovered, then tapped slowly, frame by frame, until I stopped at one. My wrist bent backward unnaturally. My boarding pass still clenched in my fingers. My hair twisted in Celine's grip. That wasn't just a scuffle. That was history being rewritten in public. "She didn't just drag me out of a seat," I muttered aloud. "She dragged years of silence out of my throat." I closed the file and opened another, an email thread from legal. Just before I hit send on the internal memo initiating final transfer of operational control, another ping pulled my attention to the corner of the screen, a video, shared by hundreds. The caption read, "I worked under both sisters. Here's the truth." The woman on camera looked older, maybe mid-50s, in a red crew uniform. Her badge read, "Beatrice C., Ground Ops Supervisor Retired." She didn't look rehearsed. She didn't look angry. She looked tired of staying quiet. "Odalyn," she said. "She was the reason Dallas didn't close its hub. She kept routes open. She funded the emergency generator upgrades. She never took credit. She just made sure we had jobs." Pause. "And Celine? She once called a single mother on my team useless baggage for taking an extra sick day. I've seen her scream at flight attendants like they were gum under her heel." Beatrice leaned forward. "You want to know who deserves to lead? It's the one who never had to shove her way into first class because she was always running the cockpit behind the curtain." I stared at the screen. This woman didn't know me. Not really. But she saw me. And suddenly, it wasn't about me versus Celine anymore. It was about every woman who's ever been erased in plain sight. The video exploded online within the hour. News anchors who'd taken Celine's bait began pulling receipts. Investors issued no-comment statements, and stock analysts started rewriting their reports. And Celine? Celine was scrambling. I could feel it. Not because I saw her, but because the silence from her side was deafening. By noon, Harper called. "You've got momentum," she said, no pleasantries. "Don't slow down." "I won't," I said. I didn't need to shout, or post a rebuttal, or chase after every headline. Instead, I opened a new message to my legal team. Subject: finalize. Body: no announcements, just execute. Full control effective immediately. Attachment: signed resolution, already notarized. I didn't look back after hitting send. Later that afternoon, I passed through headquarters for a briefing. I didn't take the main elevator. I didn't nod at the receptionist who'd ignored me for years. I didn't even glance at the nameplate still hanging next to Celine's old office. I walked straight to the executive wing, quiet, steady. From the far end of the hall, I saw her, Celine, standing alone near the vending machine, phone in hand, scrolling, maybe searching for something she could spin, salvage, weaponize, but nothing was landing. I kept walking. She turned, caught my eyes, and for the first time in decades, she looked cornered. She had the same face she wore when we were kids, the day she broke Mom's wedding vase and tried to blame me, right before I held up the matching shard she'd left in the hallway. Except this time, there were thousands of people watching, and none of them believed her anymore. After days of headlines, whispers, and backdoor meetings, the room was no longer just a room, it was a reckoning. Glass walls, rows of polished chairs, name tags lined up with precision, phones set to silent, though you could still hear the undercurrent of breath-holding. Everyone knew something was about to shift. They just didn't know which direction. I stepped inside without fanfare. Same blazer, same shoes, same expressionless face from the day I was dragged like trash down the aisle of a plane. Now, every seat was filled, except one, hers. I walked to the front, placed my binder on the table, and waited. I didn't clear my throat or raise my voice. I simply began. Good morning. I'd like to move for immediate reassignment of all executive functions under a new operational structure. Several faces twitched with confusion. A few leaned to whisper. I let them. Then, I opened the binder and turned it toward the board. Inside were notarized documents, contracts, board-approved motions, and binding legal transfers, everyone with a signature already in place. I'm not here for a vote, I added. I'm here for acknowledgement. The transition has been in process for weeks. The room went still. No one stood to oppose, no one objected, not a single hand raised. The gavel dropped with a muted clap. Just like that, it was over. Celine's title, gone. Her voice in the company, void. Her seat, still empty. I started to gather my papers when I heard the doors slam open behind me. There she was. Finally. Celine stormed in like a gust of desperate wind, cheeks flushed, breath ragged. Her heels clicked like accusations against the polished floor. In her hand, a tablet. She held it high, like some kind of twisted trophy. This, she barked, is what she didn't want you to see. She tapped the screen, projecting a grainy video of me, edited, looped, chopped. Her voice soared. This woman embezzled from her own mother's estate. This isn't leadership, it's theft. A few gasps. One man coughed awkwardly. Celine turned toward the press table, yelling, She's a disgraced dropout who parades herself like a savior, but she's always been the problem in this family, always the burden. I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded once toward Harper, who stepped forward from the side and handed me a slim folder. I opened it calmly and slid it across the table to the press liaison. Inside were stills from the original video file, metadata included. Celine's version had been altered. The timestamps, doctored. Her edits, amateurish. On top of it all, a signed whistleblower statement from one of Celine's former assistants, dated 3 weeks ago. I finally turned to face her. You handed in lies like they were facts, I said quietly. But the truth doesn't panic. It just waits. She stared at the folder like it burned her fingers. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. I wasn't done. Harper, I said evenly, read Clause 12. Harper stepped forward and opened a clean white page, highlighted in blue. Any employee, she read, found guilty of harassment, falsification of documentation, or manipulation of family-owned assets forfeits all rights to pension, stock, and future equity earnings. There was a beat of silence. Then, from the far corner of the room, a chair scraped. A man stood, Celine's fiancé. He didn't say a word, just took off his engagement ring, placed it on the table, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. Celine reached for him, but he was already gone. I turned back to the room. First class, I said, isn't for failures. Then I looked Celine in the eye, not with hate, but with clarity. But I don't throw family out. I let them walk themselves. She stood frozen in place as I packed my things and nodded to the board. No one spoke. No one followed her. Not even the cameras that had once chased her down airport terminals and corporate galas. She'd walked into the spotlight once again, but this time, the glare burned. She'd dragged me down the aisle once. Now she couldn't even find her way out of the room. And that was how it ended, not with security escorting her, not with shouting or applause, just the quiet sound of her heels clicking away, too fast, too loud, as the door slowly shut behind her. 2 weeks later, the headlines had already moved on. Stock stabilized. New executives filled the gaps. The media, once hungry for conflict, now chased newer scandals. Celine's name dropped from board announcements, promotional banners, even internal rosters. Her LinkedIn quietly changed to seeking new opportunities. I didn't speak to her again, but I did walk through that same terminal, Concourse C, Gate 4, the very one I'd boarded from when she pulled me by the hair in front of strangers. This time, it was quiet. The hallway was lined with fresh posters from the airline's newest campaign, redefining flight, redefining leadership. One of them had my face on it, not overly edited, just me, looking forward, hands at my side, no smile, just presence. I paused and stared at it, not out of vanity but because something in me still couldn't believe it had all happened. People passed by. Some glanced, no one stopped. But inside my purse was a letter, one that changed more than a vote ever could. It had arrived days earlier, hidden in a small folder delivered from an anonymous mail service. The return address was a clue. A name I hadn't heard in over a decade, William J. Winslow, my father. He was never a warm man, military, sharp edges, and very few apologies. But what I didn't know was that he'd written me a letter just months before his death. He never sent it. I found it among Selene's things, folded inside a book titled How to Lead Without Ego. The irony didn't escape me. His handwriting was stiff but familiar. Adeline, if you're reading this, I've probably already left more wrongs than rights behind, but know this. When your mother said you were the roots of this family, she meant it. You weren't loud, but you held the ground. Forgive me for not seeing that sooner. I folded the letter and slipped it into the back pocket of my notebook. Later that week, the board called again, this time with a formal offer. CEO, title, office, media run, the works. Harper was the one who told me, "You've earned it, all of it." But I shook my head. I wasn't interested in legacy that only looked good on paper. "I don't need the seat," I said softly. "I just needed to stand." So I gave them a different plan. A portion of my shares would be converted to fund a scholarship for first-generation college women, especially those in aviation, engineering, and logistics, the kind of roles they told girls like me not to dream about. I named it after my mother. Weeks passed. One fall afternoon, I returned to the community college I had once dropped out of, the same place I once walked out of during finals week with shaking hands and a stomach full of shame. This time, I was invited as a speaker. They introduced me with too many titles, so I shortened it when I took the mic. "Hi, I'm Adeline. I used to sit right where you do. I used to think I had to wait for someone to give me permission." Afterward, a student approached me. Small frame, thick glasses, nervous energy radiating off her. She didn't say much, but something in her posture reminded me of who I used to be. Before the boarding pass, before the fight, before the silence turned into strength. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small frame. Inside was the gold boarding pass from that flight, the one Celine ripped from me as if it didn't belong in my hands. I took it out of the frame and handed it to the girl. "It doesn't get you on any plane," I said with a slight smile, "but maybe it'll remind you. You get to choose where you sit." She held it like it was glass, and for the first time in a long time, I walked away from a place not out of shame, but peace. I still think of Celine sometimes, of the way she looked when the truth unraveled, of how even after all the silence, she still believed the story she built, where I was always beneath her, always undeserving. She called me a failure. But failure doesn't fight quietly for years. Failure doesn't build from scratch in the dark with no applause. Failure doesn't hand out boarding passes to girls with shaking hands. I never got my sister back, but I got myself, And this time, I'm not giving her up.